best refactoring, and I'm kind of good at creating drive-by refactorings. This is my attempt to visualize the void, so thank you guys for creating the void for the rest of us to create a conversation. So I wanted to start with that. All right, everybody can sit down. Okay. Let's do one more little improv exercise. We're supposed to be doing closing remarks, so everybody who's on Twitter, please pull out your phones. Oh, did whoever was up there take pictures? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Video and pictures as well.
No, that's fine. Whatever you took is fine if you can share later. All right. So yeah, you can come back down now. We're done with that part. So go on Twitter and let's do a closing remark. Go to the hashtag and tweet one word that became more meaningful for you over the course of these 2 days. Just one word. If you want to do more than 2 words, if you're not on Twitter and a neighbor is on Twitter, give them a word to share. The hashtag is RefactorCamp 2019. No, don't hashtag the word. All right, I'll give everybody 30 seconds to do that. Oh, and anybody watching on live stream or through Twitter, please do this as well, if you're online and not in the room here. All right, you can look up and stare at my face once you're done, so I kind of have a cue for when to stop this exercise. All right, most people seem to have done it. Okay, so that was my extremely lazy, mediocre hack on closing remarks. You guys just... And the reason for that mediocre hack was I actually have things to say, and I don't want to make it, spend time reviewing the whole event, so you guys just did that for me. I want to share a few thoughts about this sort of overall history of this event over 7 iterations. This is the 7th Refactor Camp. And it's sort of something like a truism to just say this has been the best X event ever. Like you go to any event, they'll always say this has been the best XYZ conference ever, right? And it's a truism and a trope, and it's true. I mean, if you're running an event and it continues to go on, and you're doing it again and again, it means probably that you're improving something and it's getting slightly better each time. But if you actually take that statement seriously, then that's kind of an S-curve, and this is a statement I want to make not as kind of a rhetorical gesture, but this has been the best Refactor Camp ever. But in a serious way, putting skin in the game on that front, I think this is also as good as it gets, because there's a limiting effect in a particular form factor. So Darren, thank you. You knocked it out of the park. And Darren thanked everybody else, but +1 to that because it's too long a list of names to remember. But thank you, everybody who helped make not just this Refactor Camp happen, but every one of the others. Okay, so, but I want to take that statement seriously, as good as it gets, because I think if unless we do something differently, this event is going to get stale, boring. It's going to start feeling repetitive. There's only 3 things we could do. We could stop it. Like, done, as good as it gets, let's not do it anymore. Another one would be, you kind of keep repeating it at this level, and then more and more new people, all you people who created the void for us, are going to say, yeah, this is kind of like a stale pattern that's just repeating itself. Or the third thing you can do is you can level up and completely change it, or screw it up in some way, blow it up and rethink it. And one way to do that, of course, is the traditional way: start a nonprofit organization, put 10 people in a bureaucratic committee, get a billionaire sponsor, make this a 10,000-person event with 10 tracks, right? Do I look like the kind of guy who wants to do that? Okay. But what I'd really like to try and do is, this format, I think, has gotten as good as it can get, but one format which we tried once in 2015, which was a full virtual one, I would really like to make that work. It kind of worked once, but all this stuff, everybody coming to one big centralized location, long trips. Where's Sam? Sam Chua? All right. Sam's come in 3, 4 times from Singapore?
One from Singapore, one from Shanghai.
Okay. All right. Man, you're like screwing up our carbon footprint. Like. But I'm serious about that, because climate change is one of the areas I work on a lot in my consulting life, and I kind of want to bring that into alignment in here. And I mean, this is a smart group. We've talked so much about how can we reinvent how we do things, blah, blah, blah. And we're talking about how we're going into 3D and looking at 2D simulated displays. And if this group can't figure out how to run an effective virtual conference, it's not doable. So this is a challenge I want to throw to all of you who actually want to see this continue in some form. Let's not do this anymore. Let's figure out how to do it completely virtual, distributed. We've tried it once, it kind of worked. Let's see if we can do it in a different way. If you're interested in helping me think this through and make it happen, talk to Darren and me and anybody else who's been part of organizing over the last few years, and we'll figure something out. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the history of the event. Okay, so another sort of joke I like to make is I don't want to speak at any conference that would have me as a speaker. So the Groucho Marx law of speakerdom. And honestly, I think this conference has actually gotten too good for me. I mean, this is not me being humble. If as a founder of Ribbon Farm and founder of this event, if I hadn't been in that particularly special role, and I had been sort of one of the outside group, as a complete stranger to the scene, and had applied to actually speak at this event, I think I would have had a hard time getting in, honestly. And I'm not making this up. I'm not modest. Those of you who know me well know that modesty is not one of my top traits. I think I'm a better writer than 90% of you. Sarah gives me serious competition sometimes. Drew Austin gives me serious competition sometimes. But I think I'm better at writing than 90% of you. But I'm not a better speaker than basically anybody who spoke in the last 2 days. I mean, sometimes when I'm very comfortable with a lot of people I know, I can do a fairly good job. But watch my videos when I am the stranger and outsider in a conference which is not home for me, I'm a terrible speaker. So speaking is not my strength. So it makes me wonder, that's a hack for the Groucho Marx club effect, right? It's like, all right, if you believe in Groucho Marx law of you don't want to go to anything that's willing to accept you, one hack is to found something and let it get better than you are. Right? Sit on an acorn and grow. The other thought I kind of had generally reflecting on this event over the last 7 years is I absolutely hate the word community. I've hated people saying Ribbon Farm community. I hated people saying the Refactor Camp community. And this conference, for the first time, helped me figure out why. Where's Drew? Yeah, Drew. Drew has been instrumental in helping me think about these things more clearly. And you gave me the key idea of community as a metaphor. When we think of it, it's like this traditional urbanist thing. And we all know that's not what this is. Like, if we think in terms of voids, this is the sort of physical void that we're filling as a conference right now. We're not filling it, we're filling it as, it's as good as it gets as a traditional conference, but we've been kind of like half-ass filling it when we extend it out to the live stream, maybe a quarter-ass filling it when we try to include people who are like completely virtual and tweeting, and people who could never travel here or otherwise experience this kind of thing. We've left them out completely. So it's like Brandon and I were talking after 3 scotches yesterday, and I have this decision-making heuristic of make important decisions when drunk and then review them when you're sober. So this talk is a little bit closing remarks are a little bit like that. But one of the thoughts we both kind of converged on is when a sort of positive reality is filling a void that's sort of technologically enabled, like this building, and then technology moves under the feet of whatever is filling that void. Like in this case, this is a very traditional in-a-room conference, and it's run like a conference like this would have been run like 50 years ago. But we all know that this is imperfectly filling the actual void this is, which is there's a layer of Twitter around it, there's a layer of live stream around it, there's a whole conversation around it, emails, chats, there's a signal group going on, all sorts of things are going on. And Brandon and I were talking about what happens when technology, the internet, creates a bigger void that the current reality cannot fill. And the visual metaphor I came up for thinking about that is running. So Brandon was telling me about how he often goes out and, as kind of like tech porn, specs out the most badass computer system he can, and he figured out how to get like a $50,000 MacBook Pro spec figured out. And then he was like, but when I think about what I want to do on that, I end up putting like a bunch of black and white text editors all over them. And it's like, yeah, I'm the same way. I'm a Generation Xer. I'm going to be turning 45 this year, and no matter how powerful the computer, I end up freaking playing Tetris on it. Right? So it's like our imaginations don't expand as fast as the space they're capable of filling. And that's the challenge you constantly have to navigate. And I want to sort of, that's both a comment on the themes of this conference and as well as sort of a meta comment on what to do about this conference and taking it forward. So, two things can happen. So keep two visual metaphors in mind. One is when the thing that's trying to fill the void ends up being smaller than the void is expanding. Two things can happen. It gets stretched and weirdly pixelated, right? So that's a sign of not enough information available to fill the size of the void that's growing around it. And another that can happen is what I think of as a tessellation of reality. So think of it as like sometime in, I don't know, 1850s, somebody came up with like, a weird shape which was filled by a physical conference like this. And that's like a tile-like shape. And then the space for organizing things like this started growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And one of the obvious things that we end up trying to do is repeat that as a tiling pattern all over, right? And that's why when we think of, all right, how do we run a conference like this and recreate this sort of amazing effects as a series of meetups that are distributed and connected with like, Zoom video conferencing or something, we struggle. We are like, all right, let's run like 15 parallel little 15-person meetups and connect them all with live stream. And it's like, we try it, it doesn't quite work, then we come to an event like this and somebody tells us that, hey, that's the wrong thing to do with this medium. It sort of explodes senses of scale and stuff. So Brandon and I, this is like third Scotch thinking, which is like, Brandon was defending the view of, hey, you and I have had this kind of conversation only twice. It only happens when we are together and drinking. And he was like defending the idea that this can still sort of survive, or this has a certain key value, even in like virtual reality or something. And the thought I had coming, sort of responding to Brandon was, we were both holding glasses of scotch, and I was like, all right, imagine if in VR, if we were having this interaction in VR, we could sort of enrich this in a particularly specific way, which is when I am talking, you shrink down to the size of an ant and enter my scotch glass, and I talk at you inside my glass. And then when we switch speaker roles and you're talking, I shrink down to the size of an ant and I show up inside your glass. Now, that's something that I think would be interesting. It would be weirder. It would be an imaginative use of the technological possibilities that are showing up around us. And you can sort of play this game of how do you actually do this stuff effectively. Like we've all been part of like at least, I'm sure, half a dozen ineffective Zoom or other video conferencing things. Some of them work, some of them kind of work, some of them don't work at all. But try and think of how would you reimagine something like this and creating as much richness in an online forum like that. And one of the thoughts I had was, it's kind of silly to try to just naively recreate this, which is somebody like me speaking and 5 little boxes of people kind of watching. It doesn't kind of work. Maybe we can do something else. Like maybe we can point the camera at a table where one person is assembling something and everybody else is watching and sort of trying to use them as a robot to guide the assembly. Maybe we can, here's sort of just a speculative idea of a way to do this conference online, which is We run a 6-track, so there's 120 people registered here. So maybe we do 12 tracks of 10 people each, randomly assigned. They all form like Zoom video conferencing groups, and their goal over, say, 2 weeks that the conference runs virtually online is to produce a zine. You know, take 2 weeks, do what you want, have whatever discussions you want, loosely synchronized, but the end product has to be this physical PDF-type zine that then gets published and people who want can download and print. So that might be one creative way to do a Zoom-based, like something better than like an average Zoom thing that doesn't work. So Randy, Jordan, a couple of others, we were trying to do a climate change salon for 6 sessions over the last few months. First one, 6 people showed up, then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It was like the energy fucking ran out. Like the energy barrier to actually come and do synchronized time things is going up and up. All of us prefer to do soft synchronized, Slack-like things as much as possible. But I mean, there's no denying that there is a huge value to doing certain things at certain times synchronously. And how do we recapture that potential with the new sort of online expanded void space that we have. But going back to the theme of this is as good as it gets, some of the sort of downside stuff, like, I mean, this is the first time I've met Sarah, which surprises a lot of you. And even though we've kind of hung out in like the same space for 2 days, I haven't yet actually had a chance to actually talk to you for more than like 2 minutes. Or to you, I don't know you at all, but I know you're hugely important in Sarah's life, Andrew, but I would like to get to know you, but I haven't had a chance. And in the first few Refactor camps, it was like amazing. I got a chance to have at least a 5-minute to 10-minute one-on-one conversation with just about everybody who came. And for the last 2 or 3, I don't know, half of you, I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, thank you for coming, but I haven't spoken to you. Okay, raise your hand if you've had more than a 10-minute one-on-one conversation with me. All right, raise your hand if you've been in a small meetup group with like, say, 5 to 6 people with me, even if you didn't get like, one-on-one conversations with me. All right. So you can see sort of the constraints of, like we all talk about the utopian potential of the internet and how it can sort of bring people together and connect, blah, blah, blah. But you can see the strong and sharp limits. And that's something that honestly bothers me, because it's like, why are we doing this if the part that I find the most fun gets harder and harder each time? So let's figure out how to get back to that. And I would like all your thoughts on, yeah. Just email, Twitter, wherever, get them to me, and we'll think about how to retool. What else did I have? I had a bunch of notes, actually, from last night's drunken session that I haven't actually looked at since yesterday. My title for this, if I could show it, is 3 Scotch Idea. This is the best it's ever been. This is as good as it gets. On the other hand, I don't want to shut it down or make it boring, so reinventing the conference. Refactor camp, yeah. Okay, what else do I have? Okay, I said I hate the word community, but what metaphor do I like? So I love the metaphor of this group as an airport. I've shared this with some of you, which is, I mean, when I think of a community, my definition of a community is a group of people with a shared sense of what normal is. That normal could be completely insane, but that's what a community is. You have a shared sense of normal. And this room, how many people are there? Maybe 120? I would assume that there are 240 definitions of normal here. So this is not a shared definition of normal. We are not a community. I don't want to pretend we are, and I don't like being in one. If you want communities, you have your communities. Go to them. But I love the idea of airports, which is we are all on these wonderful journeys. Tiago is taking off from like GTD land and headed towards becoming, I don't know, the arch enemy of the Anki space repetition people, something. That's his journey. Drew is been writing about urbanism. I've been telling him to write more and longer things for years now. He works for Uber. He's, I don't know, going to be, you're going to be a major thought leader on urbanism. I can see that happening, and I don't want to scare you, but I want it to happen. But I know the individual sort of airport-like stories of many of you. It's all like incoming legs, a layover. This is a layover, and then you get on your next leg of the flight and you go off somewhere else, and that's great. I love airports. I'm sort of as extremely on the side of like go completely post-ironic LA type super weakly escaped reality. I love the idea of like completely fake things that laugh at the Venice piazza. It's like, for me, I enjoy Venice, and I enjoy looking at the people who take that seriously. Then I kind of enjoy Disneyland-like type environments, but I really, really like the completely fake shit. That's my home territory. I love it. And to me, an airport is an example of that kind of built landscape that I really like to inhabit, and I think I do that in every aspect of my life. And I know there's been a little bit of a narcissistic spiel about sort of how I feel situated in this group among you, because like when we first started this, the people who've been attending meetups and this event for a long time, the cult jokes started coming early and have only grown in intensity since then.
What's your middle name?
Yeah, Kylo's been making the joke for years. I'm not going to tell you my middle name. But, and I mean, Moritz, you leave me no choice. You freaking did this exercise, and we're a cult now. No, but seriously, I mean, I don't think we are. And that's one of the other connotations of the word community that I kind of like distance myself from. I think Sarah would make a great cult leader. There's a community growing around her in Tahoe. So you, David Chapman. Now that's much more of a real community. You guys are building something a little bit closer to a shared sense of normal, but
It's only 2 couples.
it's but you're actually creating a community, and I'm sure by the time like you're done, like 10 couples will have moved in, and there'll be a wall and a mass suicide, something. But but yeah, you guys can have that. I want my airport, but yeah. So those are sort of some vague thoughts in my head about where we are, where to take this sort of thing, because this is going sort of beyond sort of our own little scene here to what's happening in the broader world. There's sort of a tipping point happening in social media and how the internet affects people who write and produce content on it and create like community on it, right? I mean, Facebook is going like internal and encrypted messaging based. All sorts of shifts are happening, and we are like tiny little pieces of wood being tossed in the seas of the big platforms and the things they're doing. And we don't want to, like when I look at, say, The Well, where Bruce Sterling writes his annual thing, or I look at the community around Stuart Brand, which has the rhymings between Stuart Brand's era and everything he did, and the overlap between the themes that they explored and what we've been exploring here for 7 years. We actually did a session on Stuart Brand a few years ago, didn't we? Yeah, Mike was, I think, one of the people leading that. So it's like there's a danger of not moving with technology as fast as technology itself is moving, and not sort of updating what you're doing with it and inside it. And the danger is that then you become this sort of frozen in time, social time capsule that looks like going to read Bruce Sterling every year. And that I do that. Whenever Bruce Sterling posts his annual thing, that's the one and only time in the year. How many of you are like me? That's the only time you ever go to the Well to read Bruce Sterling? Anybody actually go to the Well any other time? Oh, okay. Anthony, you're always the outlier on this sort of thing.
By chance every time.
Okay. But okay, so that's the sort of thing I don't want to see happen either with this community or, sorry, this airport, or I'm sorry, I've been trained by all this word meanings and stuff, but yeah, I don't want to see that happen to any, I don't know, locus of positive social energy anywhere on the internet. I would like them all to sort of keep up with whatever the fuck is going on. And I think, Darren, how much time do I have? I want to say a few more minutes. Okay, 3 minutes. Let's see if I can wrap this up. I think there are 2 wrong answers on how to respond to technology creating a bigger void that you have to fill with what you have by doing something to it. The first strong answer is the one that people like me come up with, people in their middle age who've been sort of imprinted on a technological era, in my case, the 80s or early 90s, and we don't move as fast as the technology, and we end up creating the equivalent of 2D screens in 3D environments or stretched, pixelated things. So that is an impoverishment of activity with respect to the possibilities. And the other wrong answer is what the teenagers and kids do, which is they have a lot of the right energy. You go to see these kids on TikTok or Fortnite, and the language of cultural creation on Fortnite is, I don't know, making some sort of dance moves, right? I would have never thought of that. Like, my idea of doing a conference in the Fortnite world would be create a freaking room with chairs and everybody sit. So, but the answer the children come up with is also wrong, because it's the reflection of their own imprinting stage. They're young, they're like, everything they do is like 2 degrees away from it's about getting laid. And there's a sort of, in a way, when old people have to stress their imagination to fill a large void, you end up sort of suffering from not being big enough to fill that void. Whereas when young people try to fill that same void, they have the imagination, they have the generative energy to fill that void, but they don't kind of have the depth to do it with any level of sort of complexity that'll hold your interest for more than 5 minutes. So honestly, I don't enjoy hanging out in like 22-year-old cultural scenes. It's just not fun. There's not enough depth of stuff going on. Like, I might go onto these virtual platforms like TikTok. All right, let me try a little cartoon thing for 3 seconds. I'll try it once, I'll give up. But I don't want to like stay on that. So that's the challenge I think we face as we try to like update our mental models and do something here. So I think I ran out of both time and things to say, and this is all kind of my first drive-by refactoring attempt at what I heard the last couple of days. I'll be trying to process and maybe write about it more later. But with that, I think we can call it a close. And Darren, do you have any more logistical remarks before we end?